being 100 degrees and corals having problems there, right? The spawn did happen even from some bleached corals.
Oh, wow.
Once the spawn is kind of like in the pipeline,
Can't stop.
it's pretty hard to stop. And but the reports that I've been getting have been that, you know, some of the fertilization hasn't been as strong. Some of the sperm and egg bundles weren't as robust. So there were, even though the spawns happened, there were issues. But there's this concept called ecological grief. And I know I suffered from it really hardcore. And it's the grief reaction stemming from environmental loss of ecosystems and by natural and man-made events, right? And we see this all the time. We've been talking about this in Florida, you know, and we've been talking about it at the Great Barrier Reef. And we go, I think it's important when we talk about mental health and all that kind of stuff, that some of these things have a name so you don't feel alone. There's, you know, even with recycling, it's, you go into grief. I've done everything everyone ever told me to do about recycling, and we're still fucked, right?
What's worse, day after
I've
day.
done, you know, I've done everything. I save water. I buy, you know, I don't buy new light bulbs. I changed my electricity use. You know, and the world, you know, and the coral reefs are still fucked. So there's not, you know, I don't know what to do about it, except to tell you to go vote. And, you know, if you're in a country that has voting, and vote for people who are going to think long-term rather than short-term, whatever your political affiliation is. But it does help to know that it's a thing and that you're not alone and that other people feel the same thing. And you are literally going through grief. Now, there are not stages of grief. That whole stages of grief thing is not a helpful thing. You don't go through stages. You jump around with all of those different kinds of grief. But it is a thing, and you can get help with it. And just knowing that it's named and that other people are going through might be helpful to you. So
I get a thing like this with littering. Well, when I was a little kid, my mom and I used to go to the lake, and she would bring a garbage bag, and I never saw it as a bummer. I was happy to pick up. And then I've done that for years with my own kids, to the point where they would start to get obsessed with picking up trash, you know. And I do. It's funny. We could go to somewhere beautiful, and I just get depressed when I see man's shit all over the place, all over the ground. You know, it is. There's some people that could make light of this, but I think that's the problem. I mean, if more of us would get upset about how we're fucking up the planet now.
But you got to, you know, you've got to, we can't be upset. We have to do
something.
Yeah. And yes. And I think that's all regulation and government. I think this is exactly what government is for. And so I say vote. You know, it says here in an article about the ecological grief that we're talking about, you know, one of the penalties of an ecological education is to live alone in a world of wounds. Yeah. You just see it everywhere. One of the things that triggered my depression in 2019 or whenever it was doing 10 years of work with coral reef rehabilitation. And going back year after year and seeing it get worse year after year, despite all the efforts people were making. That's fucking depressing.
Oh, yeah. I mean, isn't this not, this is, you know, there's a relation between this and, like, you know, people that work with kids that have cancer, like your job or your life endeavor pushed into something that doesn't seem to be making much of a difference. The dishes are never done.
So I think that the real thing to say about this is you're not alone. Don't feel like you shouldn't talk about it. On our Discord, we've got an area for talking about this. We talk about this in the social justice channel because I think it fits in there better than anywhere else. We don't want a million channels. Talk to people about it because you're not alone. Other people are feeling the same thing. And it's not necessarily that you are going to fix it yourself, but you might be able to get to push the Sisyphusian wheel a little to the right or to the left towards the solutions that we want to make the world a less terrible place. Because we're never going to not have an impact, right? The arguments that fossil fuels are just as bad as mining for batteries. Well, that I think mining for batteries is bad. We know how, and specifically how bad fossil fuels are. So we have to stop that, because that's really bad and emergent right now. We're going to find out how terrible mining for batteries is. And then hopefully we will catch that before it becomes too much of a problem and have a better solution for that. I think all we can do, it's not despair. What we have to do is, this is clearly bad. We have to stop doing it. We can't stop doing everything, because everything we do is bad for the planet. There's nothing we do that's good for the planet, because
you can't have 8 billion people and not hurt something.
Right. So, that's how that works. So we just got to we're very clever creatures. And I think if we just keep pushing through, we'll keep finding better answers. But we have to enable the search and experimentation for better answers.
We have to think long-term and not short-term.
Right. Our power grid in Texas, you guys are so fucked with your power grid, right? But we knew that, the dishes are never done. The power grid is never finished. And if you don't keep upgrading it all the time, eventually you're going to have to change out the whole fucking thing, which will suck, just like your aquarium. So anyway, come talk to us. We'll talk to you about ecological grief and ideas around it if you want. Totally happy to do that on the Discord. We think you rock.